A single father bought a snow-isolated stone house for $73,000, thinking he was saving his family from eviction. But when he found the hidden corridor sealed behind the library wall, what waited inside wasn't just shelter. It was $290 million in secrets that powerful men had killed to protect, and now they were coming for him. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The eviction notice had been taped to the door for 3 days before Zeus finally worked up the courage to pull it down. It was November, cold enough that his breath fogged in the dim hallway of the apartment building, but he stood there anyway, staring at the paper like it might change if he looked long enough. It didn't. 30 days to vacate. Past due rent $4,200. He crumpled it slowly and shoved it into his jacket pocket, then unlocked the door to apartment 2C. Inside, his daughter Mara sat at the kitchen table, headphones on, math homework spread in front of her. 12 years old, dark hair pulled back, her mother's eyes. She looked up when he walked in, pulled one earbud out, and asked without asking. Zeus forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes but might fool a kid if she wasn't paying attention. Mara was always paying attention. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," he said. "Just some paperwork." She didn't believe him. He could see it in the way her mouth tightened, the way she looked back down at her worksheet like the numbers there made more sense than the ones destroying their lives. In the next room, Zeus could hear his son Cole, 8 years old, playing some game on the tablet they'd bought 2 Christmases ago. The sound of digital explosions and victory music. Cole didn't know yet. Didn't understand why they'd stopped ordering pizza or why Daddy always looked so tired. Zeus walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the tub. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. $217.33. Payday was Friday, but that check was already spoken for. Groceries, electricity, the payment plan for Rebecca's medical bills, his wife. 3 years gone and still costing them everything. He wasn't angry at her. He could never be angry at Rebecca. She'd fought so hard, held on as long as she could, kissed their babies goodbye with a smile that broke him into pieces he still hadn't put back together. The cancer had taken her in stages, first her strength, then her hair, then her hope, then her breath. And when she was gone, she'd left him with 2 beautiful children, a pile of medical debt that looked like a phone number, and a heart that didn't quite beat right anymore. Zeus worked construction, had for 15 years. He was good at it, reliable, strong, the kind of guy foremen called first when a job came up. But the industry was slow lately. The company had cut his hours back to 30 a week. He'd picked up side jobs when he could, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The math didn't work. Rent was $1,700 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors fighting, floors that creaked, and a landlord who didn't fix anything unless you threatened to call the city. Mara and Cole shared a bedroom. Zeus slept on the couch, had for 2 years, told himself it was temporary. Everything was temporary. Except the debt. That felt permanent. That night, after the kids were asleep, Zeus sat in the dark living room with his laptop balanced on his knees. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, casting shadows across his face. He'd been scrolling real estate sites for weeks, not seriously, just dreaming. Looking at houses he'd never afford in towns he'd never live in. It was torture, but it was also hope, and he needed hope like he needed air. He filtered the search. Colorado, under $100,000, 3 bedrooms minimum. The results were grim. Trailers with caved-in roofs, condemned properties, teardowns in neighborhoods where gunshots were the neighborhood watch. He scrolled past them all, cursor hovering over the X button, ready to close the laptop and go to bed. Then he saw it. The listing was strange. The photo was taken from a distance, almost like whoever posted it didn't want you to see too much. A massive stone house, 3 stories tall with a tower on one corner, surrounded by pine trees heavy with snow. The mountains rose behind it like guardians. It looked like something out of a Gothic novel, dark and imposing, beautiful in a way that made you nervous. The listing read, "Historic stone estate, secluded mountain location, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, original features, needs minor updates, winter access limited, serious inquiries only, $85,000. Zeus read it 3 times. $85,000 for that. He clicked through the photos. The interior shots were dim, furniture covered in white sheets, dust visible in the shafts of light. The kitchen looked like it hadn't been touched since 1970. The bathrooms had clawfoot tubs and tiles that might have been white once. But the bones were good. The stonework was beautiful. The fireplaces were real, massive, the kind you could stand inside. He checked the location. 2 hours outside Denver, up in the mountains near a town called Pine Ridge. Population 212. No stoplights, 1 gas station. He pulled up the town on Google Maps. It was barely there, just a cluster of buildings along a 2-lane highway that dead-ended into Forest Service roads. He read the listing again. Winter access limited. That was code for snowed in. Serious inquiries only. That was code for nobody wants this place. Zeus leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone's television through the walls. He thought about Mara doing homework at a kitchen table that wobbled. He thought about Cole sleeping in a bedroom that smelled like mildew no matter how much they cleaned. He thought about the eviction notice in his jacket pocket. He thought about Rebecca. She used to talk about living in the mountains. Said she wanted the kids to grow up somewhere they could see stars, breathe clean air, build forts in the woods. She'd grown up in a suburb, hated it, dreamed of space and silence. Zeus had always nodded and agreed, but he'd never really believed it would happen. They were city people. They had jobs, routines, a life. But that life was gone. Rebecca was gone, and maybe, just maybe, this was a sign. He opened a new tab and Googled the property address. The house had been on the market for 2 years. The price had dropped 3 times. Started at $150,000, then $120,000, then $95,000, now $85,000. Nobody wanted it. Too remote, too old, too much work. But Zeus built things for a living. He knew foundations, framing, electrical, plumbing. He could fix anything if he had the time and the will, and God knows he had both. He looked at his bank account again. $217. He had $12,000 in what was left of Rebecca's life insurance. He'd been saving it for emergencies, but what was more of an emergency than losing the roof over his kids' heads? Zeus opened the contact form on the listing and started typing. "My name is Zeus. I'm interested in the property on Mountain Crest Road. I'm a single father of 2, work in construction, can close quickly if the price is right. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." He hit send before he could talk himself out of it. The reply came the next morning while Zeus was on a job site, framing out a garage addition in the suburbs. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw the email notification, and stepped away from the noise of the crew. The realtor's name was Frank. The email was short. "Property still available, owner motivated, can show this weekend if you're serious. Be advised, road conditions deteriorating, winter storm forecast. If you want to see it, need to move fast." Zeus called him right there, standing in the cold with sawdust on his boots. Frank answered on the second ring, voice rough like he smoked too much. "You the guy asking about Mountain Crest?" "That's me," Zeus said. "You know what you're getting into?" Frank asked. "That house has been empty since '98. Owner died, no heirs, estate sale. It's solid, but it's rough. And once the snow really hits, you're not getting up that road till April." "I understand," Zeus said. "I want to see it." Frank sighed. "All right, Saturday morning. Meet me at the Shell station in Pine Ridge at 9. Bring a truck if you got one. And dress warm." Zeus spent the next 2 days working every hour he could, taking an overnight shift doing demo work just to bank a few extra dollars. He didn't tell the kids yet, didn't want to get their hopes up. But Friday night, after they'd eaten spaghetti with sauce from a jar and Cole had gone to bed, Mara cornered him. "Dad, where were you last night?" "Working," he said, loading the dishwasher. "You're always working," she said quietly. "Are we okay?" Zeus turned to look at her. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, trying to look tough, but he could see the fear underneath. She was 12, but she carried weight like she was 30. He dried his hands on a towel and sat down at the table, gestured for her to sit too. She did. "I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "Things are tight, but I'm working on something. I'm going to fix it." "What kind of something?" "A fresh start," he said. "Maybe." Her eyes narrowed. "We're moving." "Maybe," he said. "I don't know yet, but I'm looking at a place tomorrow. If it works out, it could change things for us." "Where?" she asked. "Mountains," he said. "Couple hours from here." Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mom always wanted that." Zeus's throat tightened. Yeah, she did. Saturday morning came cold and clear. Zeus woke the kids at 6, made pancakes from a mix, and loaded them into his truck, a 2003 Ford F-150 that had seen better decades but still ran. Cole was excited, thought they were going on an adventure. Mara was quiet, watching the city fall away behind them as they drove west. The highway climbed into the mountains, past Golden and Idaho Springs, past the ski towns with their luxury lodges and $1,000-a-night chalets. They kept going, past the last gas station, past the last traffic light, onto a 2-lane road that twisted through pine forests so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. Pine Ridge wasn't on any tourist maps. It existed because it had to, a holdover from mining days, a place where people who wanted to be left alone went to disappear. The Shell station was at the edge of town, a faded building with 2 pumps and a handwritten sign that said, "Last fuel for 40 miles." Frank was waiting in a brown pickup, 50s, heavy jacket, a face that had seen weather. He shook Zeus's hand, glanced at the kids in the truck. "They coming?" Frank asked. "Yeah," Zeus said. "This is for them." Frank nodded like he understood, then gestured to the road ahead. "Follow me. It's about 20 minutes, but the last 5 miles are rough. You got 4-wheel drive?" "Yeah, good. You'll need it." They drove in convoy, Zeus following Frank's taillights up a road that got narrower and rougher with every mile. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that was barely a road at all. Snow lined the shoulders, and the trees pressed in close on both sides. Cole pressed his face to the window, breath fogging the glass. "Are we going to a castle?" he asked. "Something like that," Zeus said. Then the trees opened up, and there it was. The house rose from the mountain like it had grown there, 3 stories of dark stone with narrow windows and steep rooflines. The tower jutted up from the northeast corner, capped with a pointed roof covered in snow, smoke-stained chimneys, iron gates, a circular driveway choked with weeds and covered in leaves. It looked abandoned, it looked haunted, it looked perfect. Zeus parked and stepped out into the cold. The air smelled like pine and snow and something older, like stone and time. Frank walked up beside him, keys jangling in his hand. "What do you think?" Frank asked. Zeus couldn't speak for a moment. He just stared. The house was bigger than he'd imagined. The stonework was incredible. Hand-cut blocks fitted so precisely you couldn't slide a knife between them. The windows were leaded glass, some cracked, but most intact. The front door was oak, 8 feet tall, iron hinges that looked medieval. "How much land?" Zeus finally asked. 12 acres, Frank said. "Most of it forest. There's a stream on the back edge, runs year-round." Zeus walked toward the house slowly, boots crunching through the snow. Mara and Cole followed, staying close. Frank unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The hinges screamed. Inside, the air was cold and still, but not damp. The foyer was grand, stone floors, a massive fireplace on the left wall, a staircase that curved up to the second floor. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets like ghosts. Dust hung in the air, caught in the weak light from the windows. Zeus walked through slowly, his builder's eye cataloguing everything. The floors were solid, the walls were plumb. The ceilings were high, 12 feet easy with exposed beams. The kitchen was dated but functional, original appliances from the 70s, but the bones were good. The bathrooms had old fixtures but new plumbing. Someone had loved this place once. Cole ran up the stairs, his footsteps echoing. Mara followed more slowly, hand trailing on the banister. Zeus walked into what looked like a library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves empty now, and another fireplace, and windows that looked out over the valley below. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. Frank appeared in the doorway. Owner was a guy named Marcus, he said. Eccentric rich guy, bought this place in the 60s, lived here alone till he died. No family, no will. Everything went to the state. They've been trying to unload it ever since. Why so cheap? Zeus asked. Frank shrugged. Location, upkeep, and people say it's got bad energy. Previous owner was weird, kept to himself. Locals didn't trust him. After he died, couple people tried to live here. Never lasted more than a few months. Said the place felt wrong. Zeus turned to look at him. Do you think it feels wrong? Frank smiled faintly. I think people make up stories when they're scared of being alone. They walked the rest of the house. 3 bedrooms upstairs, each one bigger than the entire apartment Zeus currently rented. A master suite with its own fireplace. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub big enough to swim in. And everywhere, that same solid, beautiful stonework. On the 3rd floor, there was a single room in the tower. Circular, windows on all sides, views of mountains in every direction. Cole stood in the center, spinning slowly. I want this room, he said. Zeus smiled. We'll see, buddy. Back downstairs, Frank pulled out the paperwork. Asking price is $85,000, he said. But between you and me, the estate would take $75. They just want it gone. Zeus did the math in his head. He had $12,000. He could maybe get a loan for the rest, but his credit was wrecked from Rebecca's medical bills. What if I offered $73? Zeus asked. Cash. Close in 2 weeks. Frank raised his eyebrows. You got that kind of cash? Zeus thought of Rebecca's life insurance, the last piece of her, the last safety net. Yeah, he said. I got it. Frank studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Let me make a call. He stepped outside. Zeus stood in the foyer with his kids. Mara walked over, looked up at him. Dad, this place is huge. I know. Can we really afford it? Zeus knelt down so he was eye level with her. Baby, I'm not gonna lie. This is a risk. It's far from everything. It's gonna be a lot of work, and I don't know if it's the right move. But what I do know is that staying where we are isn't working, and sometimes you gotta take a chance. What would Mom think? Mara asked quietly. Zeus's eyes burned. He blinked hard. I think she'd say go for it. Frank came back inside, phone in his hand, grinning. They said yes. $73,000 cash, 2-week close. You got yourself a house. Zeus felt his knees go weak. He reached out and shook Frank's hand, then pulled his kids close. Cole whooped and ran up the stairs again. Mara just held on to her dad, and for the first time in 3 years, Zeus felt something that wasn't grief or fear. He felt hope. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Zeus worked every hour he could, sold everything they didn't absolutely need, packed their lives into boxes and trash bags. He withdrew the life insurance money, met with Frank, signed papers until his hand cramped. The bank was shocked he was paying cash. The title company kept asking if he was sure. He was sure. On move-in day, the sky was heavy with clouds, and the weather report called for snow. Zeus loaded the truck with everything they owned, which wasn't much, and made the drive one last time. This time, it wasn't a visit. It was home. They arrived in the late afternoon, the light already fading. The house looked different now that it was theirs, less haunting, more solid. Zeus unlocked the front door with his own key and stepped inside. The kids ran past him, claiming rooms, their voices echoing through the empty halls. Zeus stood in the foyer and just breathed. He'd done it. Against every rational thought, against every piece of advice, he'd bought a mansion in the middle of nowhere with the last money he had. He was either the bravest man alive or the dumbest. That night, they ate pizza on the floor of the library because they didn't have furniture yet. Cole fell asleep on a sleeping bag by the fireplace. Mara sat next to Zeus, staring into the flames. "You okay?" Zeus asked. "Yeah," she said. "It's just really quiet here. You'll get used to it." "Do you think Mom would like it?" Zeus looked around the room, at the stone walls and the high ceilings and the windows that framed the mountains like paintings. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think she'd love it." Later, after the kids were asleep, Zeus walked through the house alone. He checked the locks on the doors, tested the windows, made mental notes of everything that needed fixing. In the library, he stopped. Something felt off. He stood very still, listening. The house was silent, except for the wind outside and the settling of old beams. But there was something else, a warmth. He walked over to the far wall, the one lined with empty bookshelves. He put his hand against the stone. It was warm, not hot, just warm, like there was heat on the other side. He pressed his ear to the wall and tapped. The sound echoed hollow. Zeus stepped back, frowning. The wall was at least 2 feet thick, solid stone. It shouldn't sound hollow. He looked around for something to mark the spot, found a piece of chalk in his toolbox, and drew a small X on the stone. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow I'll figure out what this is. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the house was holding its breath, waiting to see if he was the kind of man who would leave mysteries alone. He wasn't. The first night in the stone house, Zeus barely slept. The wind howled through the mountains like something alive, rattling the windows and moaning through gaps in the stone. Every creak and groan made him sit up, listening, but it was just the house settling, breathing, adjusting to new occupants after decades of silence. By the time grey dawn light filtered through the windows, he'd maybe gotten 3 hours. He found Mara already awake in the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the snow-covered pines. "You hear it too?" she asked, without turning around. "Just the wind," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Cole stumbled in an hour later, hair sticking up in every direction, announcing he was starving. Zeus made scrambled eggs on the ancient gas stove, which worked better than he'd expected, and they ate breakfast at a card table they'd brought from the apartment. Through the windows, the mountains stretched endlessly, white and pristine and so quiet it felt like the world had ended, and they were the only ones left. After breakfast, Mara wanted to explore the property, but Zeus shook his head. "Storm's coming," he said, pointing at the dark clouds gathering over the peaks. "We stay inside today, get settled, figure out what needs fixing first." But his mind kept drifting back to that warm spot on the library wall, the hollow sound when he'd tapped it. He told himself it was probably just a chimney flue or an old heating duct, something logical, something boring. But the way the house had felt last night, watching, waiting, he couldn't shake the sense that there was more to it. By mid-morning, the snow started falling, not gently, not the pretty postcard kind, but hard and fast, thick flakes that erased the world beyond the windows. Within an hour, Zeus couldn't see the driveway. Within 2 hours, the road had disappeared entirely. They were cut off, completely isolated, and the reality of that hit him harder than he'd expected. If something went wrong, if one of the kids got hurt, if the power went out, they were on their own. Mara sensed his tension. "We're okay, Dad," she said quietly, like she was the parent and he was the child. "I know," he lied. Cole seemed oblivious to any danger, racing through the empty rooms, sliding on the stone floors in his socks, declaring himself king of the castle. His laughter echoed through the halls, and Zeus realized it was the first time he'd heard his son sound truly happy since Rebecca died. Maybe that alone made this insane purchase worth it. By afternoon, the house had grown darker, the storm blocking out most of the light. Zeus lit fires in 2 of the fireplaces, using wood he'd found stacked in a shed out back. The flames caught quickly, and warmth began to spread through the ground floor. He set the kids up with books and tablets in the main room, then excused himself. He grabbed his toolbox and a flashlight and headed to the library. The room looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more like what it was, an old study with empty shelves and dust-covered furniture. But that warm spot was still there. Zeus pressed his hand against the stone again, confirming it. Definitely warmer than the surrounding wall, and when he tapped it with his knuckles, definitely hollow. He spent the next hour examining the wall, running his hands over every stone, looking for seams or mechanisms. Whoever built this had been a master craftsman. The stones fit together so perfectly it was almost impossible to see where one ended and another began. But there had to be a way in. People didn't build hollow walls for no reason. He tried pushing different stones, pressing them in sequence like some kind of puzzle. Nothing. He tried pulling on the bookshelf brackets, thinking maybe one was a lever. Nothing. He even tried standing back and looking at the pattern of the stones, searching for anything unusual. Nothing. Frustrated, Zeus sat down on the floor, back against the opposite wall, just staring. His dad used to say that the best way to solve a problem was to stop trying so hard and let the answer come to you. So he sat there in the quiet, listening to the storm outside and the crackle of fires in other rooms, and just breathed. That's when he heard it. A voice from the doorway. "What you doing, Dad?" Zeus turned to see Cole standing there holding a juice box, looking curious. "Just trying to figure out this wall," Zeus said. Cole walked over and plopped down next to him. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with it. I just think there's something behind it. Like a secret room? Maybe." Cole's eyes lit up. "That's so cool. How do you open it?" Zeus shrugged. "That's the problem. I can't figure it out." Cole stood up and walked over to the wall, putting his small hand where Zeus had been pressing all afternoon. Then he did something Zeus hadn't thought to do. He hummed. Just a soft little tune, something wordless and random, the way kids do when they're thinking. And one of the stones vibrated. Zeus was on his feet in an instant. "Do that again." "Do what?" Cole asked. "That humming." "Do it again." Cole hummed the same tune, and Zeus watched in disbelief as a stone about 4 feet up from the floor began to vibrate, just slightly, just enough to see. He pressed it while Cole hummed, and the stone shifted inward with a soft click. Nothing happened. Zeus's heart was pounding. "Keep going," he said. "Try a different note." Cole hummed higher, then lower, cycling through a melody that made no sense but somehow felt right. And as he did, Zeus pressed different stones, following the vibrations. 3 more clicks, each one deeper and more resonant than the last. Then, with a grinding sound like stone scraping stone, a section of the wall shifted inward and slid to the left, revealing a dark opening about 3 feet wide. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of earth and age, and something else, something metallic. Zeus grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the darkness. Stone steps led down, disappearing into black. Cole grabbed his dad's arm, suddenly less excited and more scared. "What is that?" "I don't know," Zeus said. "But we're gonna find out." He called for Mara, who came running, and when she saw the open wall, her mouth fell open. "How did you—" "Your brother's got good ears," Zeus said, ruffling Cole's hair. Mara peered into the opening. "We're going down there?" Zeus hesitated. The smart thing would be to wait, to call someone, to be cautious. But they were snowed in with no phone signal and no neighbors for miles, and his curiosity was screaming louder than his common sense. "Yeah," he said. "We're going down there, but stay close to me." He went first, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The steps were stone, worn smooth in the centers like they'd been walked on for decades. The walls on either side were carved from the mountain itself, rough and cold to the touch. Mara followed, then Cole, each of them quiet, breathing shallow. The staircase descended about 20 feet, then leveled out into a corridor. Zeus swept his flashlight across the space and stopped. The walls here weren't rough. They were smooth, professionally finished, and lined with electrical conduit. Whoever built this had done it right. He found a junction box mounted on the wall, old but intact. Inside were several breakers, all in the off position. He hesitated, then flipped them one by one. Lights flickered on overhead, fluorescent tubes that buzzed and blinked before settling into a steady, cold glow. The corridor stretched ahead of them, maybe 50 feet long, ending in what looked like a doorway. "This is insane," Mara whispered. Zeus couldn't argue. He moved forward slowly, the kids right behind him, their footsteps echoing off stone. The air was cool but not damp, climate-controlled somehow, which meant power, which meant someone had maintained this, recently. That thought made his skin prickle. The corridor opened into a chamber, and Zeus stopped so abruptly that Mara bumped into him. He raised the flashlight, even though the overhead lights were on now, and just stared. The room was maybe 30 feet square with a vaulted ceiling. The walls were lined with shelves and climate-controlled display cases, the kind you'd see in a museum. And on those shelves, in those cases, were paintings. Dozens of them. Some were small, no bigger than a dinner plate. Others were massive, 4 feet tall, framed in ornate gold. Zeus wasn't an art expert, but even he could tell these weren't prints from a furniture store. These were real, old, the kind of paintings you saw behind velvet ropes with security guards nearby. He walked closer to one, a landscape of a European countryside, rolling hills and a stone bridge, signed in the corner with a name he couldn't quite read. Next to it was a portrait of a woman in a blue dress, her eyes following him as he moved. Next to that, an abstract piece, all bold colors and geometric shapes. "Dad," Mara said quietly, her voice shaking. "What is this place?" Zeus shook his head. He had no idea. He walked the perimeter of the room, taking it in. Each painting had a small brass plaque beneath it with a title, artist, date, and condition notes. Whoever had collected these had been meticulous. On the far wall, he found a desk, old oak, solid and heavy. On top of it sat a leather-bound ledger, thick as a Bible. Zeus opened it carefully, the spine cracking. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, dates going back to the 1960s. He flipped to a random page. May 7th, 1972. Acquired Monet study, Water Lilies series, private sale, $12,000. Restored June 1972. Current condition excellent. Zeus's mouth went dry. Monet. He flipped forward. July 19th, 1981. Acquired Picasso sketch, blue period. Estate auction, $43,000. September 2nd, 1988. Acquired Van Gogh study, Sunflowers variant, private collector, $208,000. The names blurred together. Rembrandt, Caravaggio, Degas, Renoir. Each entry was detailed, obsessive, tracking every piece from acquisition through restoration to storage. And at the very end of the ledger, on the last page, written in a shaky hand that looked different from the others, was a single line. Collection complete. 34 vehicles, 17 paintings, 42 manuscripts, estimated total value $290 million, secured until found by worthy hands. Zeus sat down hard in the desk chair. His hands were shaking. $290 million. The number didn't even feel real. It was too big, too impossible. He read it again, hoping he'd misread, but it was still there, written in fading blue ink. Mara leaned over his shoulder. "Dad, what does that mean?" "It means," Zeus said slowly, "that the house we just bought for $73,000 is sitting on top of a fortune." What happens next will turn this quiet discovery into a dangerous secret, reveal a hidden past nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the things we find can find us right back. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Cole tugged on Zeus's sleeve. Are there more rooms? Zeus looked up. The ledger had mentioned vehicles and manuscripts, but this chamber only had paintings, which meant there were other spaces down here, other corridors, other secrets. He stood up, legs unsteady, and walked back to the main corridor. Sure enough, there were 3 more passages branching off the main one, each one dark, each one waiting. They explored carefully, methodically. The second corridor led to a vault, a proper bank vault with a heavy steel door that hung open. Inside were rows of safety deposit boxes built into the walls, and on tables in the center, carefully organized collections. Rare coins in archival sleeves, their dates ranging from ancient Rome to early 20th century America. Gold bars, small ones, stamped with dates and weights. Historical artifacts, medals, jewelry, pocket watches, each one tagged and catalogued. Zeus picked up a coin at random. It was Roman, he could tell by the profile stamped on it, and according to the tag, it was from 83 AD. The tag also listed its value, $18,000. He set it down carefully and backed out of the vault, feeling like he'd stumbled into a dragon's hoard. The third corridor opened into something that made Cole gasp out loud. Cars. Vintage automobiles, 5 of them, parked in a climate-controlled garage carved out of solid rock. They gleamed under the lights, paint jobs pristine, chrome shining like mirrors. Zeus recognized a few: a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT, a 1954 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, a 1967 Shelby Cobra. Each one sat on custom platforms, tires inflated, engines preserved. There were placards in front of each car with the same obsessive detail as the paintings. Purchase date, restoration notes, current estimated value. Zeus added up the numbers in his head and stopped when he hit 40 million, for the cars alone. The fourth corridor led to a library, but not the empty one upstairs. This one was full. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books, manuscripts, scrolls in protective cases. First editions of classics, illuminated medieval manuscripts, signed copies of works by authors Zeus had studied in high school: Hemingway, Steinbeck, Faulkner. Each one preserved in archival conditions, each one worth more than Zeus made in a year. In the center of the room was another desk, and on it more ledgers. Zeus opened one and found page after page of acquisition notes, provenance research, condition reports. Whoever Marcus was, he hadn't just collected things, he'd curated them, protected them, loved them, and then hidden them away where no one would ever find them. Why? Zeus walked back to the first chamber, to the desk with the main ledger. He sat down and read through the entries more carefully this time, looking for clues. The early entries were neat, precise, almost businesslike. But as the years went on, the handwriting got messier, more urgent. There were notes in the margins: verify provenance, seller nervous, paid cash to avoid questions. Then in the entries from the 1990s, the tone changed entirely. Must secure collection. Too many questions, cannot let them find it, will protect at all costs. Zeus flipped to the very back of the ledger, past the final inventory, and found several loose pages tucked into the binding. They were letters, written but never sent, addressed to no one. The first one was dated March 3, 1997. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found what I spent my life protecting. I do not know who you are, but I hope you are someone who understands the value of beauty, of history, of preservation. This collection represents 40 years of my life, every piece acquired legally, though not always through channels that would satisfy bureaucrats and tax collectors. I built this vault because the world above is cruel to beautiful things. People destroy what they do not understand. They sell what they cannot appreciate. They fight over ownership when they should marvel at existence. I had no children, no heirs, no one to trust with this legacy. So I buried it, secured it, and prayed that someday someone worthy would stumble upon it. If that person is you, then I ask only this: do not let greed consume you. These pieces are not just assets, they are fragments of human achievement, proof that we are capable of creating something that outlasts our brief, chaotic lives. Protect them, share them if you can. But do not let them be scattered to the winds, sold to the highest bidder, forgotten in some billionaire's vault. Make them mean something. Marcus. Zeus read the letter 3 times, hands trembling. He looked around at the paintings, the cars, the artifacts, all of it hidden beneath a house that nobody wanted, in a town that nobody visited, waiting for someone to care enough to find it. And that someone was him. Mara was standing in the doorway, watching him. "What are we going to do?" she asked. Zeus didn't have an answer. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in the ledger. Then he stood up and looked at his kids, both of them staring at him with wide eyes, waiting for their dad to have a plan. First, he said, "We don't tell anyone, not yet. We need to figure out what this is, where it came from, if it's even legal for us to have it." "But it's ours, right?" Cole asked. "We bought the house." Zeus nodded slowly. "Yeah, we bought the house. But I don't know if that means we bought everything in it. Laws about hidden treasure are complicated, and if word gets out that we're sitting on $290 million, every criminal and con artist in the state will be at our door." Mara hugged herself. "I'm scared, Dad." "Me too, baby," Zeus admitted. "Me too." They went back upstairs, and Zeus sealed the wall behind them, pressing the stones in reverse until the opening ground shut. The library looked exactly as it had before, like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Zeus could feel it, the weight of the secret pressing down on him, heavier than any foundation he'd ever poured. That night, he couldn't eat. He sat at the card table picking at pasta while the kids chatted about the discovery, their fear replaced by excitement now that they were back in the familiar part of the house. Cole wanted to tell everyone at school once they found a school. Mara wanted to research the paintings online, see if any were famous. Zeus shut both ideas down. "We keep this quiet," he said firmly. "Until I figure out what to do, nobody outside this house knows. Understand?" They nodded, but he could see the questions in Mara's eyes. She was too smart, too perceptive. She knew this was bigger than he was letting on. After the kids went to bed, Zeus sat alone in the library, staring at the wall. His mind raced through scenarios. He could report the find, turn everything over to the authorities, but then what? They'd take it all, tie it up in legal battles for years, and he'd be left with nothing but a big empty house and bills he couldn't pay. He could try to sell pieces quietly, but he had no idea how to do that without getting caught or scammed or worse. He could just leave it all buried, pretend he'd never found it. But that felt like a betrayal of Marcus's letter, of the trust the old man had placed in whoever found his life's work. There was no good answer. Every path led to complications, risks, dangers, and then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Footsteps, not inside the house. Outside. Crunching through snow. Zeus moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. The storm had stopped, and the moon had broken through the clouds, casting silver light across the property. And there, at the edge of the tree line, was a figure, just standing there, watching the house. Zeus's heart hammered. He killed the lights in the library and watched from the shadows. The figure didn't move for a long moment, then turned and walked back into the trees, disappearing. Zeus ran to the front door, checked the locks, then went through the entire first floor, doing the same with every window and entrance. His hands shook as he worked. Someone knew. Someone had been watching, and that someone knew they were here. He didn't sleep at all that night. He sat in the living room with a fireplace poker across his lap, watching the windows, listening for any sound that didn't belong. Every creak of the house made him jump. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. By morning, he'd convinced himself he'd imagined it, exhaustion and stress playing tricks on his mind. But when he went outside to check the generator, he found them. Footprints in the snow. Fresh ones, leading from the tree line to the side of the house, then back again. Someone had walked right up to the building, stood there for God knows how long, then left. And in the snow, pressed into the drift near the library window, were 3 words written with a stick. I know Marcus. Zeus stared at the message until the cold made his fingers numb. Someone knew about the collection. Someone knew Marcus. And they knew Zeus had found it. He went back inside, locked the door, and tried to think. The house suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. He'd brought his kids to the middle of nowhere, cut off from help, sitting on top of a fortune that someone else clearly wanted. 2 days later, the snow had melted enough that the road was passable. Zeus needed supplies, and he needed to think, so he left the kids with strict instructions to stay inside and keep the doors locked, then drove down the mountain to Pine Ridge. The town looked exactly as he remembered, tiny, forgotten, half the buildings empty. The general store was open, run by an older woman who eyed him suspiciously when he walked in. Zeus bought groceries, batteries, and a prepaid phone, then asked casually if she knew anything about the previous owner of his house. Marcus, she said, bagging his items. Sure, everyone knew Marcus, kept to himself mostly, but he'd come into town for supplies every few weeks. Polite enough, but strange, used to ask weird questions. Like what? Like could we keep secrets, she said, and whether anyone had ever tried to buy his property. He was paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. Then one day he just stopped coming to town. We figured he died up there. His house sat empty for years before the state took it over. Did he have any friends? Anyone who visited? The woman shook her head. Not that I saw, though there was one guy came through town a few times asking about Marcus after he'd disappeared. Fancy suit, city type, said he was a lawyer or something. He stopped asking after a while. Zeus paid and left, his mind spinning. Someone had been looking for Marcus, probably looking for the collection, and now that someone knew Zeus had the house. When he got home, there was a truck parked in his driveway, a newer model, clean, out of place. Zeus's stomach dropped. He parked and walked to the front door, which was still locked. He let himself in quietly. In the living room, a man sat on one of the covered chairs like he owned the place. He was maybe 50, dressed in jeans and a heavy jacket, with a face that looked like it had taken a few punches over the years. When Zeus entered, the man stood and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You must be Zeus, the man said. I'm Garrett. I own the property about 3 miles east. Just wanted to stop by, welcome you to the neighborhood. Zeus didn't shake the offered hand. How'd you get in? Door was unlocked, Garrett lied smoothly. It wasn't, Zeus said. Garrett shrugged. Must have not caught then. Old houses, you know. Anyway, I wanted to introduce myself, see how you're settling in. We're fine, Zeus said, not moving from the doorway. Garrett looked around the room, eyes lingering on the covered furniture, the empty shelves. This place has quite a history, you know. Marcus was an interesting guy. Did you know him? Zeus asked. Met him a few times, Garrett said. Back in the 90s, he was very private, very protective of his property. Always wondered what he was hiding up here. Zeus kept his face neutral. Just an old man who liked his privacy. Garrett smiled again. Right. Well, if you ever need anything, I'm just down the road. And if you ever decide this place is too much work, too isolated, I'd be happy to take it off your hands. Make you a fair offer. We're not selling, Zeus said. Garrett nodded slowly, eyes cold. Well, you let me know if that changes. And hey, one more thing. There's talk in town about strange lights up here at night. People see things in these mountains, get superstitious. But if you ever notice anything unusual, anything that doesn't make sense, you let me know. Okay? Zeus said nothing. Garrett walked to the door, paused. Nice meeting you, Zeus. Take care of those kids. It's a long way from help up here if something goes wrong. Then he was gone, truck rumbling down the driveway. Zeus locked the door behind him and leaned against it, heart pounding. That wasn't a friendly neighbor visit. That was a warning. Someone knew about the collection, and they weren't going to stop until they got it. Zeus didn't tell the kids about Garrett's visit, at least not right away. He spent the rest of that afternoon checking every window, every door, making sure the locks worked, making sure they were secure. But security was an illusion when you were this isolated, this exposed. If someone wanted to get in badly enough, they would. That night, Mara noticed. "Dad, you keep looking out the windows. What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby," he lied. "Just checking the weather." She didn't believe him. She was 12, but she'd been forced to grow up fast after losing her mom, and she could read him better than anyone. Something happened, didn't it? Someone came here. Zeus sat down next to her on the couch, Cole already asleep upstairs. A neighbor stopped by, he said carefully. Guy named Garrett, said he wanted to welcome us. And I don't trust him, Zeus admitted. He knew too much about the house, about Marcus, asked too many questions. Mara pulled her knees up to her chest. Because of what we found. Yeah, Zeus said. I think so. What are we going to do? Zeus rubbed his face, exhausted. I don't know yet, but I need you to promise me something. If anyone comes around asking questions, anyone you don't know, you don't tell them anything. You come find me immediately. Mara nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. Are we in danger? Zeus wanted to say no, wanted to protect her from the truth, but he respected her too much to lie completely. I think we might be, he said quietly, which is why we're going to be very careful until I figure this out. The next morning, Zeus woke before dawn with a plan. He needed information, needed to understand who Marcus really was, what he'd been involved in, and why someone would still be looking for his collection 26 years after his death. He made breakfast for the kids, then told them he was driving into town, would be back before lunch. The drive down the mountain felt different now, threatening. Every car he passed could be someone watching. Every curve in the road could be an ambush. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. In Pine Ridge, he found the library, a tiny building attached to the community center. The librarian was an older man with thick glasses who looked surprised to have a visitor. Zeus asked if they had any local newspaper archives, anything about Marcus or the house on Mountain Crest Road. The librarian's expression changed. You're living there now? Yeah, Zeus said. Just bought it. The man studied him for a long moment, then gestured to a back room. We've got microfiche going back to the 50s. What exactly are you looking for? Anything about the previous owner? Marcus. The librarian nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this. Let me show you what we have. Zeus spent the next 3 hours scrolling through decades of local news. Marcus appeared sporadically at first, small mentions in society pages about art exhibitions he'd attended in Denver, charity auctions he'd donated to. But starting in the mid-80s, the tone changed. June 12, 1986, local collector Marcus Whitmore under investigation for alleged purchase of stolen artwork. Authorities declined to comment. October 3, 1988, Whitmore estate raided by federal agents. No charges filed. Whitmore's attorney claims harassment. March 19, 1991, controversial collector disappears, debts unpaid. Several creditors claim Whitmore owes over $2 million. Authorities searching for missing art dealer. May 7, 1993. Whitmore officially declared dead. Estate seized by state of Colorado. No heirs located. Zeus sat back, mind reeling. Marcus hadn't just been an eccentric collector. He'd been investigated, raided, accused of dealing in stolen art. and he'd disappeared under suspicious circumstances, owing millions to people who probably weren't the type to forgive debt. The librarian appeared with a cup of coffee. "Finding what you need?" "More than I wanted to," Zeus admitted. The old man sat down across from him. "Marcus was complicated," he said. "Some folks around here thought he was a crook. Others thought he was a visionary trying to preserve history. Truth is probably somewhere in between. Did you know him? Met him a few times. He'd come in here occasionally, researching provenance, looking up auction records. He was obsessed with authenticity, with making sure pieces were genuine. Didn't seem like the kind of guy who'd knowingly deal in stolen goods. Then why the investigation?" The librarian shrugged. "Jealousy, maybe. Greed. When you have something valuable, people find reasons to take it from you. Or maybe he did cross some lines. Like I said, complicated." Zeus thanked him and left, head spinning. He drove back up the mountain slowly, trying to process it all. The collection hidden beneath his house wasn't just valuable. It was potentially controversial, possibly illegal, definitely dangerous. When he got home, there was another vehicle in the driveway. A black sedan, expensive-looking, out of place against the snow and pine trees. Zeus's heart sank. He parked and approached cautiously. A man stepped out of the sedan before Zeus reached the door. He was mid-40s, expensive suit under a wool coat, perfectly styled hair going silver at the temples. He smiled warmly, extended his hand. "Zeus, I'm Julian Whitmore. I believe you're living in my father's house." Zeus didn't shake his hand. "Your father?" "Marcus Whitmore," Julian said smoothly. "I know this must be a shock. I've been searching for this property for years. The estate sale was handled so poorly, I didn't even know it had been sold until recently." Zeus studied him carefully. "Marcus was declared dead in 93. If you're his son, why didn't you come forward then?" Julian's smile tightened slightly. "Family complications," he said. "My father and I were estranged. By the time I learned of his death, the estate had already been processed. But I'm here now, and I'd like to discuss the property with you." "There's nothing to discuss," Zeus said. "I bought it legally." "Of course," Julian said quickly. "I'm not disputing that. In fact, I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. $500,000 cash, close within a week. You'd walk away with a significant profit." Zeus felt cold, not interested. Julian's expression hardened slightly. "You should think about it, Zeus. This property has a complicated history. There could be legal challenges, cloud the title, make it difficult for you to ever sell or refinance. Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning," Julian said. "Look, I understand you have children. This is a remote location, isolated. Things can happen up here. Accidents, break-ins. I'm offering you a clean exit." Zeus stepped closer, jaw tight. "Get off my property." Julian held up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just trying to help. But if you change your mind, here's my card. The offer stands for 72 hours. After that, well, I can't guarantee things won't get complicated." He placed a business card on the hood of Zeus's truck and drove away, the sedan's tires crunching through snow. Zeus picked up the card. It listed Julian Whitmore, estate recovery specialist, with a phone number and an address in Denver. He photographed it with his phone, then went inside. Mara met him at the door. "Who was that?" "Someone lying about who they are," Zeus said. That night, after the kids were asleep, Zeus called the only person he trusted with legal questions, an old friend from his construction days named Danny, who'd gone to law school. Danny answered on the third ring, surprised to hear from him. "Zeus, man, it's been forever. What's going on?" "I need a favor," Zeus said. "I need you to verify someone's identity." Quietly, he gave Danny all the information from Julian's card, then waited. Danny called back 2 hours later. "Zeus, this is bad. That Julian Whitmore, he's not who he says he is." "What do you mean?" "Marcus Whitmore's real son died in 2005. Car accident in Oregon. I found the death certificate. Whoever this guy is calling himself Julian, he's a fraud. Zeus's blood went cold. Then who is he? Danny's voice was tense. I don't know, but I pulled some information on that business address. It's a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. This guy is sophisticated, Zeus, and if he's willing to impersonate a dead man, he's dangerous. What do I do? Honestly? You need to call the police, maybe the FBI. This sounds like organized crime. Zeus thanked him and hung up, then sat in the dark living room staring at nothing. Organized crime. The words echoed in his head. He'd stumbled into something way over his head, and his kids were in the crossfire. The next day, Zeus went back down into the hidden vault. He needed to understand what he was really dealing with, needed to know if any of this collection was worth dying for. He spent hours going through the ledgers, cross-referencing entries with photos of the pieces. Most of the artwork seemed legitimate. Marcus had meticulous records showing private sales, auction purchases, restoration invoices. But there were gaps, pieces acquired with vague notations like estate clearance or private arrangement, no documentation. Those pieces made Zeus nervous. In Marcus's office in the vault, Zeus found a locked drawer in the desk. He forced it open with a screwdriver and found a leather journal, worn and stained. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was Marcus's, the same as in the ledgers, but looser, more personal. The entries were sporadic, dated across decades. Zeus flipped to a random page from August 9th, 1987. They came again today, asking questions about the Degas. I showed them my purchase records, the provenance chain, everything. They don't care about truth. They want to take what I've built. I've spent my life rescuing art from people who would destroy it or hoard it in vaults no one sees. I've broken some rules, yes. I've paid people who probably didn't have the right to sell, but every piece in my collection was going to be lost otherwise. I'm not a thief, I'm a guardian. Zeus flipped forward to an entry from March 3rd, 1991. I owe them too much. Borrowed from the wrong people to finance acquisitions. Thought I could pay them back through sales, but the market collapsed. Now they want their money, and they don't care how they get it. They've threatened to take the collection, sell it off piece by piece to cover the debt. I can't let that happen. These pieces belong to the world, not to criminals. I'm going to disappear. I'm going to seal everything away and vanish. Let them think I fled. Let them think I'm dead. Someday someone will find this. Someone who isn't looking for money. Someone who'll understand what I was trying to do. Zeus's hands shook as he read. Marcus hadn't died of natural causes or an accident. He'd faked his death to protect his collection from the people he owed money to. And those people were probably still out there, still looking. He flipped to the final entry, dated April 21st, 1998. I've been living in the vault for 6 months now. The house above is empty, sealed. I have enough supplies for another year, maybe 2. But my heart is failing. I can feel it. I won't live to see the statute of limitations expire on my debts. I won't live to bring this collection into the light. So I write this letter to whoever finds it. Forgive me. I built something beautiful with dirty money. I saved art that would have been destroyed, but I made deals with devils to do it. If you're reading this, you have a choice. You can sell everything, keep the money, and walk away rich. Or you can do what I couldn't. Make it mean something. Share it with the world. Protect it. Prove that beauty matters more than profit. Please, whoever you are, don't let my mistakes destroy what I built. Let this collection be my redemption. The journal fell from Zeus's hands. He sat there in the underground office, surrounded by centuries of human achievement, and felt the weight of it crushing him. This wasn't just a fortune. It was a dying man's last wish. It was a moral test, and he had no idea if he was strong enough to pass it. That night, Zeus lay awake wrestling with the decision. He could sell everything quietly, piece by piece, make enough money that his kids would never worry again. Mara could go to any college. Cole could have every opportunity. They could leave this isolated house, move somewhere safe, start over. But Marcus's words haunted him. Don't let my mistakes destroy what I built. Let this collection be my redemption. Zeus thought about Rebecca, about the promises he'd made at her bedside. Take care of them, give them a good life. But what kind of life was built on selling stolen art? What kind of man did that make him? He was still awake when he heard the noise, a soft scraping sound, metal on metal coming from outside. Zeus grabbed the flashlight and moved to the window. At first he saw nothing, just snow and shadows. Then movement near his truck. Someone was crouched by the front wheel. Zeus was out the door in seconds, barefoot in the snow, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The figure looked up, startled, then bolted into the trees. Zeus ran after them, adrenaline overriding the cold, burning his feet, but they were faster, younger, and disappeared into the forest. Zeus went back to his truck and looked at what they'd been doing. His stomach dropped. The brake lines had been cut, not completely, but enough that the fluid would leak out slowly. He would have discovered it going down the mountain when the brakes failed on one of those hairpin turns. They were trying to kill him, make it look like an accident. Zeus went back inside, locked the door, and sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. This was escalating. Whoever wanted the collection wasn't going to stop with threats and offers. They were willing to kill. He had to do something. He had to protect his kids. At dawn, Zeus drove Mara and Cole to a friend's house in the nearest real town, 40 minutes away. The friend was Danny, the lawyer, who'd offered to let them stay for a few days, no questions asked. Mara didn't want to go, asked why they couldn't stay together, but Zeus was firm. I need to handle some things, he said, and I need to know you're safe while I do it. Once the kids were gone, Zeus drove back up the mountain. The house felt emptier than it should, colder. He stood in the library and stared at the hidden wall, then made his decision. He couldn't do this alone. He needed help from someone with authority, someone who could protect him and the collection. He called the FBI. The phone rang 6 times before someone answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Denver Field Office. How can I direct your call? Zeus took a breath. I need to report a stolen art collection. I think I found one. There was a pause. Can you hold, please? He was transferred 3 times before he reached someone who seemed to take him seriously. An agent named Rebecca Torres, Art Crime Team. Her voice was professional but not unkind. Sir, you said you found a stolen art collection. I don't know if it's stolen, Zeus said carefully. But it's hidden, it's valuable, and people are trying to kill me for it. He told her everything. The house, the vault, Marcus, the ledgers, the fake Julian, the cut brake lines. He expected her to think he was crazy, but she listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then, Mr. Zeus, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't touch anything else in that vault. Don't talk to anyone else about this. I'm going to drive up there today with a team. We'll be there by 3. True to her word, Agent Rebecca Torres arrived at 2:45 with 2 other agents and a forensic specialist. Zeus met them at the door, and for a moment he just stared. Rebecca looked startlingly like his late wife. Same dark hair, same serious eyes, same way of standing with her weight slightly forward like she was ready for anything. She noticed him staring and raised an eyebrow. Something wrong? No, Zeus said quickly. Sorry. You look like someone I knew. She nodded, didn't press it. Can you show us? Zeus led them down into the vault. Their reactions were everything he'd felt times 10. The forensic specialist actually gasped when she saw the paintings. Rebecca walked the perimeter slowly, taking in every detail, her expression unreadable. This is real, she said finally. All of this is real. How can you tell? Zeus asked. Because I've been tracking Marcus Whitmore's collection for 8 years, she said. We knew he'd acquired pieces that went missing from the black market. We knew some of his purchases were questionable, but we could never find proof, and after he died, We assumed the collection had been dispersed, sold off, lost. She turned to Zeus, and there was something like wonder in her eyes. You have no idea what you've found. This is the holy grail of art crime investigation. Is it stolen? Zeus asked, the question he'd been dreading. Rebecca walked over to the ledgers, started flipping through them. Some of it, probably yes. Some of it, definitely no. We'll have to authenticate every piece, trace the provenance, cross-reference with international stolen art databases. It's going to take months. And me? Zeus asked. Am I in trouble? Rebecca looked at him carefully. You purchased the property legally. You reported the find immediately. As far as I'm concerned, you're a witness, not a suspect. But there are people who are going to be very interested in this collection, and not all of them are going to be friendly. Tell me about it, Zeus muttered, and told her about the brake lines. Rebecca's expression hardened. You need protection. I'm going to station agents on the property until we can secure this collection and get it moved to a federal facility. Zeus nodded, relief washing over him. He hadn't realized how alone he'd felt until help arrived. They spent the next 6 hours documenting everything, photographing each piece, cataloging the ledgers, taking samples for authentication. Rebecca worked with quiet intensity, and Zeus found himself watching her, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she handled the artifacts with reverence. At one point she looked up and caught him staring. What? Nothing, he said. You're really good at this. She smiled faintly. I've wanted to crack a case like this my whole career. You're Marcus Whitmore. He was a ghost. We knew he existed, but we could never pin him down. And now here's his entire life's work, perfectly preserved, waiting to tell us everything. Is he a criminal? Zeus asked. Rebecca considered the question. He's a complicated man who made questionable choices for what he probably thought were good reasons. Some of these pieces were definitely stolen. Others were rescued from private collections that were going to be destroyed. He operated in gray areas. Whether that makes him a criminal or a hero, I honestly don't know. That night, with federal agents parked outside and the collection secured, Zeus finally slept. But he was woken at 2 a.m. by shouting. He grabbed a flashlight and ran downstairs to find Rebecca and another agent at the front door, guns drawn. What's happening? Someone just tried to breach the perimeter, Rebecca said. 3 men in a truck. They fled when we confronted them. Zeus's blood ran cold. Julian, probably, Rebecca agreed. We got a partial plate. We're running it now. The next morning, Rebecca pulled Zeus aside. We identified the truck from last night. It's registered to a shell corporation tied to an organized crime syndicate out of Denver. These aren't amateurs, Zeus. They've been looking for Marcus's collection for decades. And now that they know where it is, they're going to try again. What do I do? You let us handle it, Rebecca said firmly. We're setting a trap. If they come back, we'll be ready. But they didn't come back. Not the next night or the night after. The waiting was worse than the threat. Zeus paced the house, checking windows, jumping at every sound. Rebecca's team worked around the clock authenticating pieces, and slowly a picture emerged. Of the 34 vehicles, all were legitimately acquired. Of the 17 paintings, 12 were clean, 4 were questionable, 1 was definitely stolen from a museum in France in 1979. The manuscripts and artifacts were a similar mix, mostly legitimate, a few problematic. The total legitimate value after removing the confirmed stolen items was approximately $180 million. Rebecca told Zeus this in the library, her team packing up equipment in the background. Even after we return the stolen pieces, even after taxes and legal fees, you're looking at a fortune. Zeus sat down heavily. I don't know what to do with that. Rebecca pulled up a chair. Can I give you some advice? Off the record, please. She leaned forward. You could sell everything, take the money, and disappear. Live comfortably for the rest of your life. Your kids would never want for anything. but I've seen what that does to people. Sudden wealth, especially from something like this, it changes you. Usually not for the better. What's the alternative? She smiled. You build something, a foundation, a museum, a legacy. You take Marcus's collection and make it public. You let people see these pieces, learn from them, be inspired by them. You create scholarships, fund art programs, support preservation efforts. You turn this complicated, messy situation into something meaningful. Zeus thought about Marcus's letter, about Rebecca, his wife, not the agent, about the promises he'd made. That's what Marcus wanted, he said quietly. Then maybe that's what you should do, Rebecca said. On the fourth night, they came. Not 3 men, but 8 in 2 vehicles, armed and coordinated. They breached the perimeter at exactly 3 in the morning, cutting through the fence line and approaching from 2 directions. But Rebecca's team was ready. Floodlights blazed to life, speakers blared warnings, agents in tactical gear emerged from positions around the property. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. No shots fired, just a lot of shouting and flashbangs and men hitting the ground. When it was over, all 8 were in custody, including the man calling himself Julian Whitmore. Zeus watched from the window as they were loaded into vans. Rebecca came to find him afterward, adrenaline still bright in her eyes. "We got them," she said. "The whole network. These guys have been running art theft operations for 20 years. Marcus's collection was their white whale. They've been searching for it since he disappeared." "Is it over?" Zeus asked. She nodded. "It's over. You're safe." Zeus felt his knees go weak. He sat down on the stairs and put his head in his hands, finally allowing himself to feel the fear he'd been holding back for weeks. Rebecca sat next to him, not touching, just present. "You did good," she said quietly. "You could have sold to them, taken the money, walked away. A lot of people would have." "I thought about it," Zeus admitted, "every single day. But you didn't. That says something about who you are." Zeus looked at her. "Or who I want my kids to see me as." Rebecca smiled. "Even better." 2 weeks later, the stolen pieces had been returned to their rightful owners. The French museum that had lost the painting sent a letter of gratitude. The remaining collection had been authenticated and appraised. The legal paperwork declaring Zeus the rightful owner had been filed, and Rebecca had connected him with art lawyers, foundation specialists, and museum curators who could help him build something lasting. Zeus stood in the vault one final time before it was sealed for transport to a secure facility where the pieces would be prepared for public display. He walked past the paintings, the cars, the artifacts, and thought about Marcus, about a complicated man who'd made mistakes but died trying to protect beauty. He thought about Rebecca, his wife, who'd wanted their kids to grow up somewhere with space and stars. He thought about his daughter and son, waiting at Danny's house, probably scared, probably confused, but safe. And he thought about himself, a construction worker who'd bought a house for $73,000 and found a fortune, but more importantly, found a purpose. Rebecca, the agent, appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" Zeus nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." As they climbed the stone steps back up to the house, Rebecca asked, "So what are you going to call it? The Foundation?" Zeus thought for a moment, then smiled. "The Whitmore Legacy Project. Marcus deserves to have his name mean something good." Rebecca smiled back. "I think he'd like that." And somewhere in whatever place people go when they die still carrying the weight of unfinished business, maybe Marcus Whitmore finally exhaled, finally let go, knowing that his life's work had found the worthy hands he'd prayed for. The hands of a single father who understood that some things are worth more than their price tag, who knew that legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch, the beauty you protect, and the example you set for the children watching everything you do. Zeus had been tested. He'd been threatened, manipulated, attacked, but he'd held firm. And now, standing in the house that had changed his life, he knew without doubt that he'd made the right choice. Because anyone can find a treasure. But it takes real strength to protect it, real wisdom to share it, and real courage to turn someone else's mistakes into your own redemption. Spring came slowly to the mountains that year. The snow retreated inch by inch, revealing earth that hadn't seen sunlight in months. Zeus stood on the front porch of the stone house watching the melt, coffee steaming in his hands, and for the first time since Rebecca died, he felt something that wasn't grief or fear or exhaustion. He felt possibility. The kids were back home, had been for 3 weeks now. The threat was gone, the criminals in federal custody, the collection secured. But the real work was just beginning. Zeus had spent those weeks in constant meetings with lawyers, accountants, art historians, and foundation specialists. His construction worker brain struggled with terms like non-profit governance structure and endowment management. But he listened, learned, asked questions until he understood. Mara helped more than she knew. She'd taken to researching the artwork online, creating spreadsheets of which pieces were going where, which museums were requesting loans, which universities wanted to use them for study. She was 12 years old and building a database that would make professionals jealous. Cole, meanwhile, had appointed himself tour guide of the house, even though there were no tours yet. He'd memorized facts about every room, every architectural detail, and would recite them to anyone who'd listen. One morning in late April, Rebecca Torres showed up unannounced. She'd been coming by regularly, officially to oversee the collection transfer, but Zeus suspected she had other reasons. She stood in the library where it had all begun and handed him a folder. "Authentication reports," she said. "Everything's been verified. You're clear to move forward." Zeus opened the folder, scanned the documents. After removing the stolen pieces and covering all legal costs, the collection was valued at $176 million. The number still didn't feel real. "The board of directors for your foundation has been assembled," Rebecca continued. "You've got representatives from 3 major museums, 2 art preservation organizations, and a legal team specializing in cultural property. They're ready to help you build this." Zeus set the folder down. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is a mistake, that a guy like me has no business running something this big." Rebecca smiled. "A guy like you is exactly who should be running it. You're not in this for profit or prestige. You're doing it because you think it matters. That's rare." Over the next months, the transformation began. Not just of the collection, but of everything. Zeus hired contractors, people he'd worked with for years, to help renovate the stone house. They reinforced the structure, updated the electrical and plumbing, restored the fireplaces and windows, but they did it carefully, preserving the character, the history, the soul of the place. The underground vault became a climate-controlled exhibition space, professionally designed with proper lighting, security, and accessibility. The stone corridors that had hidden secrets for decades were now passages that would welcome visitors. The chamber that had held Marcus's paintings was transformed into a rotating gallery. The vault with the artifacts became an educational space for students and researchers. But Zeus didn't stop there. He converted the 3rd floor of the house into offices for the foundation staff. The tower room that Cole had claimed became a library and research center filled with books about art history, preservation techniques, and the stories behind each piece in the collection. The main floor became a visitor center with a small cafe, a gift shop, and an orientation theater. And the town of Pine Ridge, population 212, began to change too. At first, the locals were suspicious. Rich guy comes in, starts building a museum, probably going to price everyone out. But Zeus didn't operate that way. He hired locally whenever possible. He partnered with the town to improve the roads leading to the property. He set up a scholarship fund specifically for kids from Pine Ridge who wanted to study art, history, or preservation. The general store owner, the woman who'd been skeptical when Zeus first arrived, came to him one afternoon with an idea. "What if we opened a bed and breakfast," she asked, "for people visiting the museum?" Zeus not only encouraged it, he helped her secure a small business loan through the foundation. The gas station expanded, added a restaurant. Someone opened a small hotel. An artist from Denver moved to town and opened a gallery. Slowly, carefully, the dying mountain town started breathing again. Not everyone was happy about it. There was pushback, complaints about traffic, about outsiders, about change. Zeus listened to every concern, held town halls, made adjustments. When people worried about property taxes going up, he worked with the county to establish protections for long-time residents. When someone complained about noise, he limited visitor hours and established quiet zones. He wasn't trying to transform Pine Ridge into a tourist trap. He was trying to give it a sustainable future while respecting its past. And gradually, people came around. 6 months after that first discovery, the Whitmore Legacy Foundation officially opened its doors. The ceremony was small, intentional. No politicians, no celebrities, just the people who'd made it possible. The contractors who'd rebuilt the house, the art historians who'd authenticated the pieces, the town residents who'd taken a chance on believing, and standing in the front row, Mara and Cole, dressed up and proud. Zeus gave a speech, short and from the heart. "A year ago," he said, "I was a single dad facing eviction, trying to figure out how to keep my kids fed and housed. I bought this place because I was desperate. I found what was hidden here because I was curious. But what happened next? That was a choice." He looked out at the faces watching him, at Rebecca Torres standing off to the side, at his children holding hands in the front row. "I could have sold everything and disappeared. I could have kept it secret and lived off it quietly. But a man named Marcus Whitmore left a message asking whoever found his collection to make it mean something, to prove that beauty matters more than profit. So that's what we're trying to do here." He gestured to the stone house behind him, transformed but still recognizably the same building that had stood alone and forgotten for so long. "This isn't just a museum. It's a promise that art and history and beauty belong to everyone, not just the wealthy. That small towns matter, that second chances are possible, that mistakes don't have to define us, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones we choose to share." The applause was quiet, respectful, but it felt like more than noise. It felt like agreement. That first weekend, they welcomed 217 visitors. People from Denver and Colorado Springs, from small towns across the state, from as far away as California and Texas. They walked through the galleries, stood in front of paintings that had been hidden for decades, sat in the library reading Marcus's journals, which Zeus had decided to make public, the whole truth, and marveled at vintage cars that gleamed like new. But Zeus's favorite moments weren't with the art collectors or the wealthy patrons. They were with the kids. School groups started coming, busloads of students from underfunded districts who'd never been to a museum before. Zeus watched them stand in front of a Van Gogh study, eyes wide, asking questions, sketching in notebooks, and he understood why Marcus had fought so hard to protect these pieces. Art wasn't just decoration. It was proof of what humans could create when they chose beauty over destruction. And every kid who stood in that gallery, especially the ones who looked like him, brown-skinned and rough around the edges, the ones who'd been told museums weren't for people like them, every one of those kids left believing they belonged in spaces like this, believing they could create something meaningful too. Mara threw herself into the foundation with intensity that both worried and impressed Zeus. She created a junior docent program, training other teenagers to give tours. She started a blog about the collection that got picked up by art education websites. She even convinced Zeus to let her help interview candidates for the foundation's first class of scholarship recipients. One evening, after a particularly long day, Zeus found her in the tower library, surrounded by applications, methodically sorting them into piles. "You don't have to do all this," he said gently. "You're 12. You should be, I don't know, hanging out with friends, watching movies, being a kid. Mara looked up at him with Rebecca's eyes, serious and determined. This is what I want to do, Dad. Mom always said we should find something worth fighting for. This is mine. Zeus sat down next to her, picked up one of the applications. It was from a 15-year-old girl in Pueblo who wanted to study art restoration, but whose family couldn't afford it. Her essay was beautiful, raw, honest. She sounds like she deserves it, Zeus said. They all deserve it, Mara replied. That's why it's so hard to choose. She paused, then looked at her dad. Do you ever wonder what Mom would think about all this? Zeus's throat tightened. Every day, baby. Every single day. I think she'd be proud, Mara said quietly. Not because of the money or the museum, but because you chose to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing. Zeus pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. I'm proud of you too, you know. You've been so strong through all of this. I learned from the best, she said. Cole's involvement was different but equally important. He didn't care about the administrative side, the paperwork and planning. He cared about the stories. He'd sit with visitors, especially older ones, and ask them about their favorite pieces, why they loved art, what it meant to them. Then he'd remember every word and repeat those stories to the next group. One Saturday afternoon, Zeus found him in the vintage car gallery talking to an elderly veteran who'd broken down crying in front of the 1967 Shelby Cobra. My brother had one just like this, the old man was saying. He died in Vietnam. I haven't seen one since. Cole, 9 years old now, took the man's hand. Do you want to sit with it for a while? I can make sure nobody bothers you. Zeus watched from the doorway, tears streaming down his face, as his son offered comfort with a grace that couldn't be taught. Rebecca would have loved the boy Cole was becoming. She would have loved both of them. The foundation's impact grew faster than Zeus had anticipated. Within the first year, they'd loaned pieces to 14 museums across the country, established partnerships with 8 universities, funded 32 scholarships, and welcomed over 40,000 visitors. The economic impact on Pine Ridge was significant. The town's population had grown to 307. Property values had increased, but carefully, not explosively. New businesses had opened, but the character of the place remained. Not everyone celebrated. There were articles questioning whether Zeus was qualified to run such an organization. Critics suggested the collection should be broken up and distributed to major museums in big cities where more people could see it. One particularly nasty editorial called him an amateur playing curator with stolen goods. Zeus read them all, let them sting, then got back to work. Rebecca Torres, who'd become both an advisor and a friend, told him something that stuck. You're not going to please everyone, she said. People who've never built anything love to criticize those who do. Let your work speak for itself. And it did. The foundation won awards. The Smithsonian requested a partnership. The National Endowment for the Arts recognized their scholarship program as a model for rural art education. Slowly, the critics quieted. But the real validation came from unexpected places. 2 years after the foundation opened, Zeus received a letter from France. It was from the director of the museum that had lost the stolen painting, the one that had been returned from Marcus's collection. The letter was formal at first, thanking Zeus for his cooperation in the recovery. But the final paragraph was different. We have researched Monsieur Whitmore's collection and learned his story. While we cannot condone theft, we recognize that he preserved many pieces that might otherwise have been lost. The painting you returned to us had been missing for 43 years. We had given up hope of ever seeing it again. Your choice to report this discovery rather than profit from it speaks to exceptional character. On behalf of the French people, we thank you. Zeus framed that letter and hung it in his office, not out of pride but as a reminder. Marcus had made mistakes, crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. but he'd also saved beauty from destruction. The world wasn't black and white. People were complicated, and redemption was always possible. Another letter came from Marcus's only living relative, a distant cousin in Oregon who'd never met him. She wrote about growing up hearing stories of crazy Uncle Marcus, who disappeared owing money and was probably a crook. But after learning what Zeus had done with the collection, she'd changed her mind. "Maybe he wasn't crazy," she wrote. "Maybe he saw something the rest of us missed. Thank you for proving that." The hardest moment came on the 3rd anniversary of Rebecca's death. Zeus had been so busy building the foundation that he'd almost forgotten the date. Mara remembered. She woke him early, and together they drove to the small cemetery in Denver where Rebecca was buried. They stood in front of the headstone in silence for a long time. Then Mara spoke. "I told her about the museum," she said quietly, "about what you built, about how many people you're helping." Zeus wiped his eyes. "Think she heard?" "I know she did," Mara said, "and I think she's proud." Cole, who'd been quiet, placed a drawing on the grave. It was a picture of the stone house, the mountains behind it, and a woman made of stars watching over it all. Underneath, in his careful handwriting, he'd written, "Mom's Museum, Zeus broke." He sat down right there on the grass and sobbed, all the grief he'd been holding for 3 years finally pouring out. And his kids sat with him, one on each side, holding him together the way he'd held them together for so long. When he could finally speak, Zeus looked at Rebecca's name carved in stone and made her a promise out loud. "We're okay," he said. "I kept them safe. I gave them something to believe in. I hope that's enough. I hope you know I tried." The wind moved through the trees, gentle and warm, and for just a moment Zeus could swear he felt her hand on his shoulder, felt her voice in his ear saying what she'd always said when he doubted himself. "You're stronger than you think, and they're lucky to have you." By the 4th year, the Whitmore Legacy Foundation had become more than a museum. It was a movement. The scholarship program had funded 123 students, 12 of whom had already graduated college and come back to work in arts and preservation. The foundation had partnered with tribes in Colorado and New Mexico to help preserve indigenous art and artifacts. They'd established a restoration training program that brought experts from around the world to teach in the mountains of Colorado. And Zeus, the construction worker who'd bought a house for $73,000, had become a respected voice in the art world. He was invited to speak at conferences, to sit on boards, to advise other foundations. He turned down most of it, preferring to stay in Pine Ridge to focus on the work, but he accepted one invitation. The Louvre in Paris asked him to speak at a symposium on art preservation and repatriation. Zeus had never been out of the country. The idea terrified him. But Mara and Cole convinced him to go, and Rebecca Torres offered to accompany him to help navigate the French art world. Standing in the Louvre, surrounded by masterpieces, speaking to experts who'd spent their entire lives in museums, Zeus felt completely out of place. But when he told Marcus's story, when he explained how a single father's desperate gamble had turned into a foundation that was changing lives, the room fell silent. Afterward, a woman approached him. She was elegant, French, probably 70 years old. She took his hands in hers and said in accented English, "My father was an art dealer in Paris. He knew your Marcus Whitmore in the 1970s. Everyone said Marcus was troubled, obsessive, possibly criminal. But my father always said no, he's a man who loves beauty in a world that destroys it. He said Marcus was trying to save things, not steal them. I think he was right." Zeus flew home from Paris with a new understanding. Marcus had been part of a network of people who operated in the shadows, who bent rules because they believed the rules were wrong, who saved art from destruction even when it cost them everything. He wasn't a hero or a villain. He was human, flawed and brilliant, and desperately trying to leave the world more beautiful than he found it. Back in Pine Ridge, Zeus gathered his staff and made an announcement. "We're expanding," he said. "We're going to create a residency program for artists who can't afford studio space. We're going to establish a fund to help small towns build their own cultural centers. We're going to prove that art doesn't belong in just major cities. It belongs everywhere." The expansion took 2 more years, but it happened. The Stonehouse property grew to include studio spaces, artist housing, and a sculpture garden. The foundation purchased 2 abandoned buildings in downtown Pine Ridge and converted them into gallery and performance spaces. They brought in musicians, dancers, writers, and craftspeople. The town that had been dying when Zeus arrived was now thriving. The population had grown to 431. The high school had added an arts program. 3 galleries had opened. And most importantly, kids who grew up there no longer felt like they had to leave to find opportunity. One evening, 6 years after buying the house, Zeus stood in the tower library, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Mara was 18 now, graduating high school in a week, heading to college in the fall to study art history and non-profit management. Cole was 15, already talking about becoming a documentary filmmaker, wanting to tell stories about art and the people who created it. Rebecca Torres found him there, as she often did. They'd grown close over the years, their professional relationship evolving into genuine friendship, and maybe, recently, something more. Neither of them had acknowledged it yet, too scared of what it might mean, but it was there, gentle and patient. "Thinking about the journey?" she asked, standing beside him. "Thinking about how none of this was the plan," Zeus said. "I just wanted to keep my kids from being homeless. I bought a broken house in the middle of nowhere because I was desperate. And somehow it became," he gestured at the window, at the property below, alive with visitors and artists and possibility, all of this. "That's not luck," Rebecca said. "That's you. You could have sold everything the moment you found it. You could have walked away rich and anonymous. But you chose the harder path." "I chose what Marcus asked for," Zeus corrected. "I chose what Rebecca, his wife, would have wanted. I chose what my kids needed to see." "And what about what you needed?" Rebecca asked. Zeus turned to look at her. "What do you mean? You've spent 6 years building this foundation, raising your kids, honoring everyone else's dreams and memories. What about Zeus? What does he want?" Zeus was quiet for a long time. Then, honestly, "I want to keep doing this. I want to wake up and know that the work I'm doing matters. I want my kids to understand that wealth isn't about money, it's about impact. I want," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I want to stop being afraid of being happy again." Rebecca's eyes softened. "That's allowed, you know. Being happy, moving forward." She took a breath. "Your wife sounds like she was an incredible person. I'm sure she'd want you to live fully, not just exist." Zeus felt tears prick his eyes. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen how you honor her," Rebecca said. "You've built a life that reflects her values. You've raised children who carry her kindness. She's not forgotten. She never will be. But that doesn't mean your story ended when hers did." That night, after Rebecca left, after the kids were asleep, Zeus wrote a letter. Not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, to Rebecca his wife, to Marcus, to himself. He wrote about the journey, about the fear and the choices and the moments he'd wanted to quit. He wrote about discovering that strength isn't about never being afraid, it's about moving forward despite fear. He wrote about learning that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up. And at the end, he wrote, "I think I'm finally ready to stop just surviving and start truly living, ready to believe I deserve happiness as much as anyone, ready to build a future that honors the past but isn't trapped by it." He folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and put it in the desk drawer in the Tower Library, the desk where Marcus's journal sat, where history and hope intersected. Maybe someday someone would find it. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Writing it had been enough. The scholarship ceremony that spring was particularly meaningful. The foundation was awarding its largest class yet, 37 students from across Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming. Each one had written essays about how art had changed their lives, about their dreams for the future, about overcoming obstacles. Zeus read every single essay personally, just like he did every year. There was the young man from a reservation who'd learned beading from his grandmother and wanted to preserve traditional techniques. The girl from a coal mining town who'd discovered painting and saw it as a way to document her community's struggles. The kid from inner-city Denver who'd never been to a museum until a field trip to the Whitmore Foundation changed everything. Standing at the podium, looking at 37 faces full of hope and determination, Zeus didn't feel like an imposter anymore. He felt like exactly who he was supposed to be. 6 years ago, he began, I was broke, scared, and out of options. I bought a house I couldn't really afford, hoping it would save my family. What I found instead was a responsibility I didn't ask for and a choice I wasn't prepared to make. He paused, letting the moment settle. Every person in this room has faced their own version of that choice. Keep what you have or share it. Play it safe or take a risk. Focus on yourself or lift others up. And you, he gestured to the scholarship recipients, you've already chosen. You've chosen to pursue dreams that seemed impossible. You've chosen to believe in yourselves when others doubted. You've chosen beauty and creativity and expression in a world that often values none of those things. He smiled, feeling his wife's presence, feeling Marcus's gratitude, feeling his own hard-won peace. So here's what I want you to know. You belong here. Your dreams matter. Your voices deserve to be heard. And this foundation, everything we've built, it exists because I was given a second chance and chose not to waste it. We're giving you the same chance now. Don't waste it either. Create fearlessly. Fail spectacularly. Learn constantly. And when you make it, when you become the artists and historians and curators and teachers you're meant to be, remember this moment. Remember that someone believed in you, and then find someone else to believe in. That's how we change the world. One choice, one person, one shared dream at a time. The applause was thunderous, and Zeus looked to the side of the stage where Mara and Cole stood with Rebecca Torres, all three of them crying and smiling, and he realized something profound. This was his family now, not just his children, but everyone touched by this work. Everyone who'd chosen to believe that beauty and community and second chances mattered. That night, the foundation held a gala, the first they'd ever done. Zeus hated the formality of it, the tuxedos and champagne, but the board had convinced him it was necessary for fundraising. Donors came from across the country, wealthy patrons who wanted to support the work. But the moment Zeus would remember forever came near the end of the evening. An elderly man approached him, walking with a cane, tears streaming down his weathered face. Zeus didn't recognize him at first, then saw the name tag, Elliot Warren, and his heart stopped. According to the research Rebecca's team had done, Elliot Warren was one of the people Marcus Whitmore had owed money to when he disappeared. He was on the list of creditors who'd never been paid, who'd spent decades believing Marcus had stolen from them. Zeus started to apologize, to explain, but Elliot held up his hand. I didn't come here for an apology, he said, voice shaking. I came to say thank you. Zeus was confused. Thank you, Elliot nodded. I spent 30 years hating Marcus Whitmore. Thought he was a con artist who took my money and ran. But tonight, seeing what you've built, seeing what his collection has become, he paused, wiping his eyes. I understand now. He wasn't trying to cheat me. He was trying to save something bigger than both of us. And maybe he did. Elliot looked around the gallery, at the paintings and the people and the magic of it all. I loaned him $40,000 in 1990. Never saw a penny back. I thought it destroyed me. But you know what? I made that money again. I had a good life. But what he preserved, what you're sharing now, that's priceless. So thank you for showing me I was wrong about him. Thank you for turning my anger into something beautiful." They stood together in silence, two men connected by a third man's complicated legacy, and Zeus understood that this was redemption. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone touched by his story. Every bad choice could be transformed, every mistake could birth meaning if someone was brave enough to try. As the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Zeus found himself alone in the original chamber, the first room he'd discovered, now a gallery featuring Marcus's favorite pieces. He stood in front of the Van Gogh study, the painting that had started it all, and spoke quietly to the man who'd hidden it. "I hope I did right by you," he said. "I hope this is what you wanted. I hope you're at peace now, knowing it wasn't all for nothing." He turned to leave and found Rebecca Torres standing in the doorway, still in her elegant gown, watching him with soft eyes. "Talking to ghosts?" she asked gently. "Making sure they know they're not forgotten," Zeus replied. She walked over, stood beside him looking at the painting. "You know what I think? I think Marcus would be amazed, not just by the foundation, but by you. You took his complicated, messy legacy and made it clean, made it pure, made it matter." "We did that," Zeus corrected. "All of us." Rebecca turned to face him. "Can I tell you something? Off the record, as your friend and not your advisor." "Always." She took a breath. "I came to Colorado 6 years ago because of this case. I stayed because of this foundation. But I'm not leaving, even though the case is long closed and my official role here is done. And the reason I'm not leaving," she paused, gathering courage, "is you." Zeus's heart hammered. "Rebecca, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I know you loved your wife. I know you still do. I'm not trying to replace her or compete with her memory. But I also think, and I hope, that maybe there's room in your life for someone new. Someone who sees who you are now and chooses you anyway." Zeus reached for her hand, held it carefully like it was something precious. "My wife's name was Rebecca too," he said quietly. "I thought that was just a coincidence when we met. But maybe it was the universe telling me something, telling me it's okay to move forward, that love doesn't end, it transforms." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Zeus took a breath, "I'm terrified and completely unprepared and probably going to mess this up. But I'd like to try, if you're patient with me. If you understand that some days I'm still going to be sad, still going to miss her, still going to feel guilty for being happy." She smiled through tears. "I can do patient. I've waited 6 years already. What's a little longer?" They stood in the gallery surrounded by centuries of human achievement, proof that beauty endures, that love in all its forms is worth fighting for, that second chances are real, and Zeus kissed her. Gentle, tentative, terrified, hopeful. And somewhere, in whatever place existed beyond the veil, he felt his Rebecca, his first love, his wife, his children's mother, giving her blessing, letting him know she'd always be part of him. But his story wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter. 10 years after buying the stone house for $73,000, Zeus stood on the same front porch where he'd stood that first morning, coffee in hand, watching the mountains wake up. But everything was different now. The foundation had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. They'd expanded to 3 additional locations across the West. They'd funded over 500 scholarships. They'd helped 27 small towns establish cultural centers. They'd become a model for how to build sustainable arts organizations in rural communities. Mara had graduated college and come back to work as the foundation's director of education. She'd gotten married the previous summer, a small ceremony in the sculpture garden, and was expecting her first child. Zeus was going to be a grandfather. The thought terrified and thrilled him equally. Cole had become a filmmaker, just like he'd planned. His first documentary about the foundation had won awards and brought even more attention to the work. He was currently in New Mexico filming a series about indigenous artists, but he called every Sunday without fail. And Rebecca, his Rebecca, the one who'd walked into his life hunting art criminals and stayed because she loved what he was building. She was inside making breakfast, probably burning the eggs like she did every morning, filling the house with smoke and laughter. They'd gotten married 3 years ago, quiet and simple, just family and close friends. She'd brought her own daughter into the mix, a teenager from a previous marriage who'd been skeptical of Zeus at first, but who now called him Dad without hesitation. Their blended family was messy and loud and absolutely perfect. The stone house had become more than a museum. It was a home, a workplace, a gathering space, a symbol. It represented what was possible when you chose purpose over profit, when you shared instead of hoarded, when you believed broken things could be made beautiful again. Zeus heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Mara, 8 months pregnant, carrying her own cup of coffee. Decaf now. "Morning, Dad," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "Morning, baby girl. How's my grandson doing?" She smiled. "Active. I think he's got Mom's energy." Zeus's throat tightened. He still missed Rebecca, his first Rebecca, every single day, but the grief had softened into something gentler, something that coexisted with joy instead of smothering it. "I was thinking about her this morning," Mara said quietly, reading his mind like she always could, "about how she'd love all this, the foundation, the family, everything you built." "She would," Zeus agreed. "She'd also be giving me hell for burning myself out trying to do too much." Mara laughed. "Yeah, she would." She paused. Then, "Dad, do you ever regret it? Buying this place? Everything that came after?" Zeus thought about the question, really considered it. He thought about the fear, the danger, the sleepless nights. He thought about the weight of responsibility, the criticism, the constant pressure. He thought about all the easy paths he could have taken, all the money he could have kept. Then he looked at his daughter, brilliant and kind and building her own life filled with purpose. He thought about Cole following his dreams. He thought about the hundreds of students who'd received scholarships, the thousands of visitors who'd found inspiration, the small towns that had been revitalized, the artists who'd been supported, the beauty that had been preserved and shared. "Not for a second," he said, "not even once." Later that morning, Zeus gave a tour to a group of students from a struggling school district in Wyoming. They walked through the galleries wide-eyed and quiet, taking in paintings and artifacts they'd only seen in textbooks. In the Marcus Whitmore Memorial Library, Zeus told them the story, all of it, the complicated truth about a man who made mistakes but died trying to protect beauty, about a desperate father who found a fortune and chose to share it, about how one choice could ripple outward and change everything. At the end of the tour, a young girl raised her hand. She was maybe 10, small for her age, with paint stains on her jacket. "Yes?" Zeus asked. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know sharing it was the right choice?" Zeus knelt down so he was eye level with her. "I didn't know," he admitted. "I was terrified I was making a mistake. But my wife, before she died, she told me something. She said the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. And I had a choice. I could get rich or I could get free. And getting free meant letting go of the burden of wealth and embracing the responsibility of stewardship." "What's stewardship?" the girl asked. "It means taking care of something that doesn't belong to you, so you can pass it on to the next person better than you found it," Zeus explained. "That's what we do here. We take care of these beautiful things, not because we own them, but because the world deserves to see them, because you deserve to see them." The girl smiled, gap-toothed and bright. "I'm going to be a painter when I grow up." "Then you paint fearlessly," Zeus said. "And if you need help getting there, you come find us. We'll make sure you have what you need." After the students left, Zeus walked through the foundation alone, taking in everything they'd built. He stopped in front of a wall of photographs, a tribute to everyone who'd made it possible. Contractors and volunteers, donors and staff, students and artists. And in the center, a picture of Marcus Whitmore, stern-faced and serious, next to a picture of Rebecca, Zeus's Rebecca, laughing in a hospital bed, weak but radiant, still beautiful even as the cancer consumed her. Two people who'd never met, connected by a man who loved them both, whose choices honored them both. Zeus placed his hand on the wall, feeling the weight of gratitude, the lightness of purpose. "Thank you," he whispered, "both of you, for showing me what matters." That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Rebecca, his wife Mara, and her husband, Cole, home from New Mexico, Rebecca's daughter, and a handful of Foundation staff who'd become family over the years. They crowded around the long table in the Stonehouse's dining room, the same room that had been covered in dusty sheets when Zeus first arrived, now filled with light and laughter and the smell of home cooking. Zeus looked around the table and felt his chest swell. This was wealth, not the $176 million in assets the Foundation managed, not the property or the prestige or the recognition. These people, this purpose, this proof that broken things could be rebuilt into something stronger. Before they ate, Zeus raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, "to complicated legacies and worthy hands, to the people who believe beauty matters and act accordingly, and to family, the one we're born into and the one we choose. May we always choose wisely." They drank, and then the chaos of family dinner took over. Conversations overlapping, laughter echoing off stone walls, Cole telling stories about his film shoot, Mara complaining about pregnancy discomforts, Rebecca, his wife, teasing him about his terrible cooking, all of it messy and perfect and alive. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Zeus stood one final time in the library where it had all begun. The wall was sealed now, the entrance to the vault locked and secured, but he could still remember that first moment of discovery, the way his heart had hammered when the stones shifted and revealed darkness and possibility. He'd been a different man then, broken by grief, crushed by circumstances, desperate and afraid. He'd made a choice in that moment, and then another, each one leading him here, to safety, to purpose, to family, to love that he'd thought he'd never feel again. Anyone can find a treasure, Zeus thought, but it takes real courage to protect it, real wisdom to share it, and real strength to let it change you. He turned off the lights and walked upstairs to where Rebecca was already in bed, reading, waiting for him. He climbed in beside her, and she set down her book and curled into him, familiar and right. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, "I really am," because Zeus had learned the most important lesson of all. That redemption wasn't something you received, it was something you built. That legacy wasn't about what you left behind. It was about what you made possible while you were here. And that sometimes the greatest fortune wasn't the one you found buried in stone and shadow, but the one you created with choice and courage and love. The stone house stood quiet now, settled into itself, content. And somewhere in the Foundation's archives, in a drawer in the Tower Library, 2 letters rested side by side. One from Marcus Whitmore asking for worthy hands, and one from Zeus promising to use those hands well. Both men had gotten what they'd hoped for. Marcus's collection lived on, shared and celebrated and transforming lives. And Zeus, the single father who'd bought a snow-isolated stone house thinking he was just buying shelter, had discovered something far more valuable: purpose, family, redemption, proof that even the most broken among us can build something beautiful if we're brave enough to try. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep discovering with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe broken things still deserve to shine, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we choose to share.